My aunt laughed at my scar in front of everyone at her backyard BBQ. She thought it made me small. She had no idea her own husband would recognize it and destroy the version of her she'd spent years protecting. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. I almost didn't go that afternoon. I sat in my car with the engine running, watching people drift through Lynn's open gate like they actually belonged there. The smell of grilled meat hung in the air, mixed with cut grass and summer heat. Laughter floated out in easy bursts. The kind of laughter that never seemed to reach me. But my mom had asked. She always asked carefully, like she was afraid I'd break if she pushed too hard. So I went. Lynn spotted me the moment I stepped into the yard. She always did. Tall, perfectly styled, holding court near the grill like she owned not just the house but the family itself. Her eyes slid straight to my arm, just below the sleeve of my shirt, where the scar curved pale and obvious against my skin. "Oh, Ava," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you didn't even bother covering that thing?" A few heads turned. I felt my shoulders tighten. "What thing?" someone asked. Lynn smiled wider. "Her little accident. You remember. Always so clumsy." She waved her hand like she was brushing crumbs off a table. "Honestly, it's been years. You'd think she'd be over it." A couple of people laughed. Not cruelly, not kindly either. Just enough to let me know. They agreed it was harmless fun. I said nothing. I never did. Staying quiet had become a reflex, like flinching before impact. Lynn kept going. I mean, if I'd known it would scar like that, I might have suggested a better doctor. She tilted her head, pretending to study it. Or maybe it's just one of those things. Some people heal better than others. My fingers curled into my palm. The scar seemed to burn, not with pain, but with memory. I didn't let myself touch. That's when I noticed Grant. He stood a little apart from the group, a plate in one hand he hadn't eaten from. Lynn's husband rarely spoke at these gatherings. He was polite, distant, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. His eyes were on me. Not in the way Lynn's were, not judging or amused. He was studying the scar. I felt it before I understood it. The way his posture shifted. The way his jaw tightened just slightly, like something inside him had clicked into place. Lynn laughed again. "See? Even Grant's noticed it now." "Sorry, honey," she added, glancing back at him. "Family entertainment." Grant didn't smile. He didn't laugh. His gaze stayed fixed on my arm, then lifted slowly to my face. For the first time since I'd arrived, someone looked at me like they were actually seeing me. And for reasons I couldn't explain yet, Lynn's laughter suddenly sounded too loud, too sharp, like glass about to crack. Growing up, I learned early that every family seems to need someone to blame. In mine, that role slowly became mine. It did not happen all at once. It was quiet, almost polite, like a chair being pulled out from under me inch by inch. After my dad, Mark, passed away, things shifted. He had been the kind of person who balanced a room without trying. When he was gone, the space he left behind did not stay empty for long. Lynn stepped into it. Not openly, not at first. She started by organizing holidays, then handling small family decisions, then speaking for others before they could speak for themselves. No one stopped her. It felt easier to let her lead than to question her. I was still a kid, still figuring out grief, when the labels began. If I was quiet, I was distant. If I spoke up, I was dramatic. If I disagreed, I was ungrateful. The words stuck because they were repeated just enough times to sound true. Once a story settles into a family, it does not need proof anymore. Money became part of it too. Decisions about help, support, and what made sense were suddenly discussed without me in the room. When I asked questions, the air changed. Lynn would sigh, like I was exhausting her, and remind everyone how sensitive I was. How difficult. People nodded, relieved to have a simple explanation. The scar turned into her favorite example, not because of what it was, but because of what she said it meant. To her, it proved I was careless, reckless. Someone who made problems and then expected others to fix them. Every time it was mentioned, The story grew sharper, more polished. My side of it was never needed, because hers was already accepted. My mom, Ruth, saw it all. I know she did. I could see it in the way her mouth tightened when Lynn spoke, or how her hand would hover near mine and then pull back. She wanted peace more than truth. After losing my dad, she clung to the idea that keeping the family together mattered more than correcting lies. Silence became her compromise. That silence cost me more than anyone realized. Family gatherings stopped feeling safe. I learned to stay small, to answer questions carefully, to laugh when I was supposed to. Correcting Lynn felt pointless. The room always leaned toward her version of events, and I was tired of pushing against it alone. Over time, I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped hoping someone would step in. It was easier to accept the role I'd been given than to fight it every time. When people already believe they know who you are, telling the truth feels like shouting into the wind. Still, something in me never fully gave in. I carried the weight quietly, but I remembered everything. Every word, every look, every moment I was made into the problem so others could stay comfortable. I did not know then that stories like that only survive until the wrong person starts asking the right questions. I was 16 when everything changed, though it took years for me to understand how much. That day started like many others, with Lynn telling me she needed help. She had a way of asking that sounded like trust, like I was being chosen because I was responsible enough to handle something important. I wanted to believe that. It was supposed to be a small family matter, nothing serious. She told me not to worry, said she had it under control. I remember hesitating for a moment, feeling something off, but I pushed it aside. I had been taught to listen, to be useful, to not make things harder than they needed to be. Things went wrong quickly, not in a dramatic way, just fast enough that there was no time to think. Someone else was at risk, someone younger and more scared than I was. I reacted without planning, without asking what it might cost me. I stepped in because it felt like the only choice. The pain came after. Not just physical, but sharp and confusing, like realizing too late that you trusted the wrong person. I remember sitting still, trying to stay calm, while Lynn kept talking. She sounded annoyed more than worried. She told me not to make a scene. She said we would explain it later. Later never came the way I thought it would. By the time adults were involved, the story had already been shaped. Lynn spoke first. She always did. Her version was neat and confident. She said I had acted on my own, that I had been careless and dramatic. She shook her head like she was disappointed but not surprised. People listened. They usually did. No one asked me what happened. No one pulled me aside to check if I was telling the truth. It was easier to accept Lynn's explanation than to question it. Her story fit the version of me they had already been given. I stayed quiet. Part of it was fear. Part of it was exhaustion. Correcting her meant standing alone in a room full of people who had already decided. I did not have the words back then, or the strength, to fight a story that sounded so sure of itself. As time passed, the truth became something I carried instead of shared. The injury healed the way injuries do, leaving behind a mark that people felt free to comment on without knowing anything about it. Lynn treated it like proof she had been right all along. She never apologized. She never checked to see how I was doing afterward. She just moved on, confident the past was settled. I told myself it did not matter anymore. I told myself surviving was enough. But the truth does not disappear just because it is ignored. It waits, it hardens. It becomes something you learn to live around. I did not know then that silence can only last so long. I did not know that one day, someone would look at that mark and see more than the story they were told. The afternoon moved on like nothing was wrong, but I could feel the air changing around me. Grant stepped closer while people talked over each other, his voice calm when he spoke my name. He asked simply how I got the scar. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the kind of question that sounds harmless unless you know it is not. Before I could answer, Lynn cut in. She laughed and waved her hand, repeating the same explanation she had used for years. She spoke quickly, like she was finishing a sentence she had memorized. Her tone was light, almost bored, as if the answer had been settled long ago. Grant did not interrupt her. He nodded once, slowly. Then he asked another question. It was small, almost technical. Something about timing. Something about where I was standing when it happened. Lynn hesitated just a second before replying, and that second stretched. He asked again, still calm but more focused. His voice lost its casual edge. I noticed his posture change, the way his shoulders squared without him realizing it. His fingers stopped moving against the edge of his plate. Everything about him went still. Lynn kept talking, but her words started to overlap. She corrected herself once, then laughed it off. She looked around, waiting for someone else to jump in, to agree with her, to help carry the story the rest of the way. No one did. Grant looked at me again. Not in a comforting way, not with pity. It was the look of someone comparing details, placing them carefully side by side. He asked me one short question, then another. He did not rush me. He did not fill the silence when I took a second to answer. I felt my heart beating in my ears. I answered only what was asked. Nothing more. Nothing less. Lynn's smile tightened. She tried to joke, saying he was overthinking it, that he was always in work mode. Grant did not smile back. Instead, he asked her to repeat part of her story. Just that part. She did, but it came out differently this time. That was when I saw it clearly. The shift. Grant's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in recognition. Like he had seen this before. Not my face, not my family, but the pattern underneath it all. The kind of pattern that does not belong to accidents. He asked one more question, quieter than the rest. Lynn answered too quickly. The words tumbled out wrong. Grant exhaled slowly. He did not accuse. He did not raise his voice. He just said that something did not make sense, that the details did not match what he knew. Lynn scoffed, brushing it off, but her confidence was gone. People nearby had stopped talking. Forks paused midair. No one laughed this time. I stood there, saying very little, watching the version of the story I had lived under for years start to crack. Not because I fought it, but because someone finally noticed the gaps. And once those gaps were seen, there was no way to pretend they were not there. Grant waited until the noise around us softened, then motioned toward the side of the yard where it was quieter. It was not a command. It felt more like an invitation. I followed him without thinking too much about it. We stopped near the fence, away from the grill smoke and laughter. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear music playing faintly from inside the house and the sound of glasses clinking. It felt strange to stand there, separate from everything, like the rest of the day had been muted. He asked me to tell him what happened. Not the short version. Not the version meant to keep things smooth. He said he wanted it from the beginning, and he asked me to take my time. I almost didn't answer. My first instinct was to deflect, to say it was old and not worth digging up. I had spent years convincing myself that keeping quiet was easier than reopening something no one wanted to face. My throat tightened, and for a second I thought I might stop there. But Grant did not rush me. He did not fill the silence with advice or assumptions. He just waited, like he was prepared to hear whatever came next. So I started talking. I chose my words carefully at first, sticking to facts, keeping my voice steady. As I went on, something shifted. The details I had carried alone for so long began to come out more clearly. I explained what I remembered, what choices were made, and what was left to me in that moment. I did not soften it, but I did not exaggerate it either. I told it the way it lived in my head, unchanged by time. Grant listened the entire time. He did not interrupt. He did not react when my voice faltered. His attention never drifted. It felt unfamiliar, being heard without being corrected. When I finished, I expected questions, maybe doubt, maybe a polite response that led nowhere. Instead, he nodded slowly, like he had reached a conclusion long before I stopped speaking. He told me he had seen injuries like mine during his work, not once or twice, but enough to recognize them. He said they came from very specific situations, and accidents were not one of them. His voice was low, careful, like he understood the weight of what he was saying. He made it clear that he was not guessing. He was certain. I felt something loosen in my chest that I had not realized was tight. Not relief exactly, but validation. Someone with no reason to protect me or doubt me was confirming what I had always known but never said out loud. Grant looked at me and said none of what happened was my fault. He did not say it dramatically. He said it like a statement of fact, the same way someone might comment on the weather. For the first time, I believed it. We stood there a moment longer, the noise of the gathering slowly returning. Nothing around us had changed, but everything between us had. I walked back toward the crowd knowing that the truth was no longer mine to carry alone. Lynn noticed us the moment we walked back toward the group. Her eyes narrowed, not with curiosity, but with calculation. She smiled, but it did not reach her face. I could tell she felt something slipping, and that feeling made her reckless. She raised her voice so others could hear. She joked about secrets and whispered conversations, then turned it on me. She said if I had something to say, I should say it out loud instead of hiding behind people. The words were sharp, meant to corner me. A few heads turned again, the circle tightened. She laughed and told everyone they should hear my version, as if it were entertainment. She expected me to shrink. She always did, but I did not. I stood there quietly, my hands steady at my sides. I did not look at the ground. I did not rush to explain. For once, I did not feel the need to defend myself. The calm surprised even me. Grant stepped forward before I could speak. His voice was even, but it carried. He did not scold her. He did not raise his tone. He simply asked her to explain what happened again, clearly, so everyone could understand. Lynn blinked, then laughed it off. She said there was nothing new to explain. Still, she started talking. Her story came out fast, like she was afraid of silence. She added details that had not been there before. She skipped others she had always included. Grant listened, his face unreadable. When she finished, he asked one small question. Hua, T, and Texiv. Then another. Nothing aggressive. Just precise. Lynn corrected herself once. Then twice. She blamed confusion. She joked about memory. Her words tangled as she tried to keep control of the room. The confidence she usually wore so easily began to crack. People noticed. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Someone else frowned. No one interrupted Grant. No one came to Lynn's rescue. She tried to turn it back on me, saying I was sensitive, that I always misunderstood things. Grant stopped her with a single raised hand. He asked her to repeat one specific part of her story, exactly as she had said it before. She could not. The silence that followed felt heavy. Lynn's voice dropped, and she grew defensive. She accused Grant of making a big deal out of nothing. She said families should not question each other like this. Grant responded calmly. He said families should care about the truth. He said details matter when someone gets hurt. Lynn looked around, searching for agreement, but the room had changed. The laughter was gone. People avoided her eyes. The attention she once controlled now pressed in on her. For years, she had shaped every conversation without resistance. Now, under simple questions, her story bent and twisted until it no longer held. I realized then that power does not disappear loudly. Sometimes it slips away quietly, one unanswered question at a time. Lynn had pushed too far, and she could feel it. The version of events she had protected for so long could no longer stand on its own, and everyone could see it. Grant did not raise his voice when he spoke again. He did not need to. The yard was already quiet, like everyone was holding their breath without realizing it. He stood straight, his hands relaxed, and spoke the way someone does when they are explaining something they know well. He said he had spent years working with situations where details mattered. He explained that certain injuries are not random, and they do not come from simple mistakes. The way he talked was calm, careful, almost instructional. There was no anger in it, which somehow made it heavier. People listened. Even those who had been half distracted earlier were now fully focused. Grant described what the scar showed, not in graphic terms, but in clear ones. He explained how timing, position, and response all tell a story on their own. He made it clear that these signs do not change just because time passes. Lynn tried to interrupt with a laugh. She said he was being dramatic, that he was turning a family moment into a case study. Her laugh rang out alone. No one joined her. It faded quickly, leaving an awkward silence behind. Grant continued without looking at her. He said that if Ava's account was accurate, then what happened was not an accident. He said it meant someone had made a choice and then avoided responsibility for it. His words were simple, but they landed hard. He did not accuse Lynn directly. He did not point or raise his eyebrows. He spoke in conditionals, laying out the facts as they were. Still, everyone understood what he was saying. The room did the math on its own. Lynn shifted her weight and crossed her arms. She said people were overreacting. She said memories change and stories get mixed up. She tried to turn it into something small, something forgettable. Grant finally looked at her. His expression was steady, not cold, not cruel. He said that memories can blur, but patterns do not. He said that lies often rely on others staying quiet, and that silence can look like agreement when it is not. Someone near the table cleared their throat. Another person set their drink down slowly. The sound felt loud in the stillness. Lynn looked around, searching for support. She smiled again, but it was thin now. She made a joke about how serious everyone was being. It did not land. The air felt different, heavier, like the truth had weight once it was spoken aloud. Grant said one last thing. He said that protecting the truth matters more than protecting comfort. He said families should not ignore harm just to keep things pleasant. No one argued. No one laughed. No one changed the subject. I stood there, listening, feeling something settle inside me. Grant had not spoken for me, but he had made space for the truth to exist without being dismissed. He had said what needed to be said without drama or cruelty. Lynn stayed silent for once. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something tight and uncertain. The version of the story she had controlled for years could no longer survive under plain facts. And in that quiet moment, with everyone watching, it became clear that the truth no longer belonged only to me. Grant looked at me again, this time with everyone watching. His voice was steady when he asked one last question. He asked if Lynn had ever apologized to me for what happened. Not privately. Not later, ever. I did not hesitate. I did not soften it. I said one word, no. That single word seemed to land harder than anything else said that day. It was simple. It could not be argued with. It did not leave room for explanation or excuses. My mom made a small sound beside me. I turned just in time to see her press her lips together, her eyes filling in a way I had not seen before. For years she had avoided moments like this, choosing quiet over conflict. Now she stepped forward, her hand shaking slightly. She said she should have spoken up a long time ago. Her voice cracked as she admitted she had known parts of the story never added up. She said she stayed silent because she thought keeping peace was the same as protecting family. She said she was wrong. The yard felt smaller somehow, like the truth was pulling everyone closer whether they wanted it or not. Cole shifted his weight and cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, but determined. He said he had always felt something was off. He admitted he had noticed changes in the story over the years, but told himself it was not his place to question it. He said hearing everything out loud made it impossible to ignore anymore. Others began reacting in quieter ways. A cousin frowned, replaying memories. An older relative stared at the ground. Small looks passed between people as pieces finally lined up. Moments they had brushed aside suddenly made sense. Lynn tried to speak, but her words came out rushed and tangled. She accused everyone of turning against her. She said she had done her best and was being attacked for it. The authority she once held in the room slipped with every sentence. No one rushed to calm her. No one defended her version of events. The energy had shifted too far for that. Grant did not interrupt. He let the room see what was happening on its own. Lynn's confidence faded as she realized the attention she once controlled was no longer hers. People were not listening to her now. They were listening to the truth they had avoided for years. I stood quietly through it all. I did not feel the urge to add anything. The facts were finally doing the work for me. Everything Lynn had built depended on silence and doubt. Without those, it had nowhere to stand. My mom reached for my hand and held it tightly. It was a small gesture, but it felt like something long overdue. Cole met my eyes and nodded, not as an apology, but as acknowledgement. Lynn looked around one last time, searching for someone to agree with her, to laugh, to change the subject. No one did. Her voice trailed off and she stepped back, suddenly unsure of where she stood. In that moment, it became clear that the betrayal was no longer hidden. It was exposed not by shouting or revenge, but by honesty spoken at the right time. And once everyone saw it, there was no way to pretend it had never been there. Grant turned toward the group, his posture calm but firm. He said he was leaving the gathering early. The words carried weight, though his tone did not rise. He made it clear that Lynn would be coming with him, not as a partner or to defend her, but to answer for her actions. The message was subtle, but everyone understood it. This was not about punishment. It was about accountability. Lynn's face went pale. She opened her mouth, probably to protest, but no sound came out. The energy around her shifted as the room took in Grant's words. He did not need to yell or demand attention. The simple statement was enough to change the room's focus completely. He explained briefly that the conversation they had begun today was far from over. It would not be left behind, whispered about in corners, or dismissed once people went home. The truth had been spoken in front of witnesses, and it would follow them beyond the yard. Lynn looked around, searching for support. No one offered it. People had seen too much and heard too clearly. Her usual allies had grown quiet, hesitant, unsure of how to respond to a shift they could not reverse. The power she relied on for years had slipped, quietly but decisively. Grant did not speak to me directly. He did not need to. I understood the effect of his words. Lynn realized finally that mocking me, making me small, and twisting the truth was not harmless. It had been a miscalculation. She had assumed that silence, fear, and habit would keep me contained. She had assumed no one would question her version of events. I watched her eyes dart around the yard as she processed what had happened. She had spent years controlling family moments, laughing at others' discomfort, and believing herself untouchable. In that moment, it became clear that her judgment had failed her. The wrong person had spoken up, and the consequences were immediate. Grant's approach made it undeniable. There was no spectacle, no shouting, no drama, just clear boundaries and expectations. The quiet authority behind his words carried more weight than any argument or accusation could have. He demonstrated that consequences do not need noise to be effective. People nearby shifted in their seats, sensing the seriousness without a single raised voice. The crowd that had laughed at my scar before now held an attentive stillness. They understood that the truth had shifted the balance, and nothing would be the same after this moment. Lynn finally swallowed, her mouth closing as she realized she could no longer manipulate or charm her way out of the situation. Her smirk, once confident and sharp, had vanished. The subtle yet undeniable power of accountability had replaced it. I stayed still, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief. For years, I had carried this quietly, waiting for recognition or justice that never came. Now it had arrived without spectacle. The scar on my arm no longer marked just pain. It marked a turning point, a moment when truth demanded recognition, and consequences unfolded silently but fully. Weeks passed after that day, and the house felt different even when I returned to family gatherings. No one mentioned the scar anymore, not because it disappeared, but because it had lost its power. The way people looked at me had shifted quietly, almost imperceptibly, but it was there. They no longer saw the mark as a flaw or weakness. It was just part of me, nothing more. I realized I had not needed to raise my voice or force anyone to notice the truth. I had simply answered honestly when someone asked the right questions. That small act, speaking without hesitation, had changed everything. The weight I carried for years had begun to lift, not all at once, but in the way sunlight slowly warms a room. Lynn, on the other hand, moved differently. She no longer commanded attention the way she once did. The ease with which she twisted stories and drew laughter had vanished. People watched her more critically now, noticing the cracks she had tried so hard to hide. Every gathering reminded her that the authority she had built on silence and manipulation could not withstand scrutiny. I caught myself remembering how long it had taken for anyone to question the stories I had been forced to live under. I thought about the years of quiet frustration, of being careful with every word, every reaction. And yet, for the first time, I felt that restraint had not been wasted. It had prepared me to speak clearly when it mattered. I walked through the yard at the next family event, observing conversations from a distance. Laughter floated around, but it did not sting. My shoulders felt lighter. The scar on my arm, once a source of embarrassment and shame, no longer dictated my presence. It had become a reminder of endurance, a symbol that the truth has a way of finding its place, even if it arrives slowly. My mother's expression was softer now. She did not have to choose between silence and peace anymore. She could be present without apology, without holding back small truths out of fear. Even my cousin Cole seemed more at ease, interacting without the shadow of doubt he had carried for so long. I thought about Lynn. She spent her days trying to rebuild control, but the moment had passed her by. The power she once held depended on belief and fear, and those had evaporated quietly. People no longer took her word as absolute. Her explanations fell flat, her justifications meaningless. The space she had relied on to dominate had shrunk. I breathed in deeply, feeling the calm that came from knowing the truth could not be erased. The scar had not changed, but my relationship with it had. It no longer defined my story, or the way others saw me. It simply existed, like a memory, no longer a weapon or a mark of shame. And as I moved forward, lighter than I had been in years, I understood something important. Truth, once spoken, carries a weight no lie can match. It does not need force or anger to shift the world around it. It only needs to be heard. I let myself smile, quietly, knowing that I was no longer living under the shadow of someone else's story. The scar marked survival now, not weakness, and for the first time, that felt enough.